Reddit investors take on Wall Street. First GameStop. So which stocks are next? Executive action in the fight against climate change. And some words that many of us have been mispronouncing for a long time. Here's what you need to know. Good morning, this is Cheddar's Need2Know podcast for Thursday, January 28th. I am Jill Wagner with Carlo Versano. Carlo, most people are probably listening to us and not watching us, but if you are watching us on YouTube,
oh God,
I think you're going to get a little nostalgia here. Is this what you looked like back in the 90s, cruising the halls of your middle school?
That is, you're so mean to me lately.
I feel like
I'm freezing. I am freezing in this house today. So yes, I'm wearing my knit hat and a sweatshirt. Now I feel bad. Now I feel like a loser. But it is true.
I wish I was home in my sweatshirt and a hoodie sweatshirt and a beanie cap.
I'm just playing. This is actually you're right. This is actually what I used to. This was my look basically through college.
All right, let's get to some news. A crazy day on Wall Street. So the stock market just had its worst day since October. You wouldn't have noticed, though, if you've only been following the so-called meme stocks that have been swept up in the Reddit versus Wall Street saga. So you've got AMC up 300% on the day. Express, the 90s shopping mall stalwart, up 214%. GameStop was up another 135%. BlackBerry and Nokia both said they have no idea why their stocks were up so much. In response to the Reddit-fueled rally, NASDAQ says it was going to halt trading in stocks if they find unusual activity linked to social media. So, Carlo, this is now, for anyone who's trying to kind of understand what's going on here, it's pretty much a battle between Wall Street hedge funds and these so-called institutional investors versus this new young class of investors raised on the internet who have a deep distaste for the establishment and are kind of trying to just like stick it to them. They're basically trying to stick it to short sellers looking for stocks that have a lot of short selling attached to it, and then they're trying to just buy them up to basically bankrupt whichever hedge funds or whatnot were shorting them. It's wild, and in the process, they're making a ton of money.
For now, they are. Jill, at the same time yesterday, we found out that Senator Dianne Feinstein in California, she said that she's willing to pay a fine after failing to disclose that her husband had been making stock purchases that she did not disclose. Isn't that the bigger scandal here? Isn't that what we should be regulating? You know, why are lawmakers and their families allowed to own or trade equities or any sort of securities at all? And I say this because, you know, what you're starting to see here with the NASDAQ coming out and saying that, like, basically they're going to start to clamp down on this. The SEC, by the way, came out of their slumber last night to say, like, they're monitoring the situation or something like that. To me, it's just like the fact that the people who write the rules are the ones who are also able to own and trade securities. That to me is just such a bigger scandal. Do you remember last March when it came out that all of those members of Congress were getting COVID briefings that were showing them how bad this thing was going to get? And then they were going out publicly talking about how, oh, it's no big deal, don't worry. And then also selling all of their portfolios. I mean, you know, we forget because there was just so much news back then. That should have, you know, if there was anything that should have put people in the streets in the last year, it should have been that, to be honest with you. But it's good to be king, right? I mean, that's what happens when you write the rules. But I just say that because you're starting to see a lot of like the entrenched players in politics and on Wall Street say that, you know, this is not okay. It's not okay for you know, people on social media to manipulate the market. I don't know. It's done all the time. I find it a little bit hard to get worked up about it, I guess.
I mean, even Nancy Pelosi, we recently learned in a financial filing that her family has about $1 million investment in Tesla, or up to $1 million. She's going to be voting on legislation that directly affects the electric vehicle market. There is a major conflict of interest here, and I don't know how it's allowed to happen. It seems crazy. But I
Right.
guess the problem is that lawmakers themselves would have to be the ones who write legislation that would make it illegal for them to do it, and
Yes.
I don't see that happening. In the case of what we're seeing with the Reddit traders, most analysts think there is market manipulation here, which is not allowed, but it isn't
Right.
clear how the SEC would or could stop it. It doesn't seem like that's really possible. The downside of it, I mean, there are going to be a lot of people who do wind up losing money on this. Even these Reddit traders, like the last ones out, are going
Yeah.
to lose money because the fundamentals for these stocks, there's a reason that these institutional
Right.
investors are shorting GameStop and Express. Again, these nostalgia 90s
Yeah,
names.
right.
It's because they lose money, or their business model just doesn't work anymore with these huge brick and mortar presence. So eventually,
Right.
I think that I don't know how it ends. It's certainly interesting to watch.
It's certainly interesting to watch, and in some ways, I like the fact that individual investors are sort of ganging up to take on the entrenched players. I'm certainly not going to cry if some hedge fund loses its shirt in the process, but I mean, this is like to your point right there, Jill. This is obviously a speculative bubble at this point. Regular people are exposing themselves to huge losses, and it's going to end badly for a lot of them. Stocks don't only go up. If you just sort of came to the market, in the last year or two, you may think that they do, but they don't. It's also, this is another sort of like theory of mine. It's evidence, I think, why these stimulus checks should be means tested. And I know a lot of people on the left are not going to agree with that. But, think about it, right? If you give somebody who's like 25 years old, they're working from home, they haven't lost their job, they don't have anything to do.
Their
they've
savings
got,
have probably gone up because they're not going
their
out to
savings have
brunch
gone
with their
up.
friends.
Right. So you get a check for $600 from the government or $1,400 from the government. You're like, all right, I'm going to put this into my Robinhood account. I'm going to get into GameStop. You're not spending you're not spending that money to actually stimulate the economy, right? It's just going back into the market. So this is what's going to happen, I think, especially when you have these apps like Robinhood that have completely gamified this whole. I mean, the stock market is a casino, right? It is, but the way that these new apps have created this system where it literally feels like you're playing a slot machine, that's something we've got to reckon with, I think.
Scott Galloway from the Pivot podcast, he has said that had Wall Street, had the markets really tanked during the pandemic and stayed low, right? They tanked originally, but then they shot up. They're at record levels now, that the response would have been dramatically different. Like that we would have had this thing nailed down in terms of the pandemic if look, the President Trump at the time has always touted the good stock market, right? So had the stock market and his argument is had the stock market and just like the elite, really wealthy in this country felt even one hit of an economic issue, that we could have the actual response to the pandemic would have been dramatically different. The question is now, though, I mean, so the VIX, which monitors volatility, that shot up yesterday. So I think there is a question that some are asking. Does this action, right, this action from Reddit investors going after the shorts, right? They're basically looking at whatever stock has a lot of short selling related to it, and they want to take it on, and then those are the ones that they're buying. I mean, that's pretty much kind of what's happening.
Right.
So are you going to find that institutional investors, for number one, they're going to they're probably going to sell their shorts, and they do that by taking money that they have in other positions, right? They're probably long in other stocks, and they're going to use that money to kind of cover their shorts. Is that what's happening? Is that going to create a real market pullback? Where maybe people say, I'm going to sit on the sidelines and see how this thing plays out before I get killed in it, So I don't know. It's wild. So I mean, we actually are not allowed to have money in the stock market, unlike lawmakers. For someone who covers the market, I'm not allowed to play. I'm not allowed to have money in the market. So I'm kind of watching from the sidelines here. But I do have a 401k.
Nancy Pelosi can own Tesla, but I can't buy a share of AMC if I wanted to.
While we're on the topic, a lot of the big tech companies reported their earnings last night. Apple and Facebook reported record earnings for the holiday period. Apple topping $100 billion in quarterly sales for the first time, thanks to high demand for the iPhone 12. Facebook posting record profits on the strength of its ad business. Tesla, meanwhile, more of a mixed bag. The automaker reported its first full-year profit, but on weaker than expected margins. Tesla made $721 million in 2020 compared to a loss of $862 million in 2019.
You talk about a bubble. I mean, 721 million, that's a nice little payout, except for the fact that Tesla's market cap is like $1 trillion. That's a whole nother ball of wax, and I just don't know enough about it to have an opinion, I guess. By the way, I think Tesla's an amazing company. But back to Facebook for a minute, just because on the earnings call yesterday, Mark Zuckerberg said something that I thought was huge news, and I'm a little bit surprised it didn't get more pickup. He said that Facebook will permanently take political groups out of the recommendation algorithm globally, and is working on ways to reduce political content in the news feed. If that actually happens, and that's a big if, all of this is a big if with Facebook, that is a huge deal. I've said it before on this podcast. The Facebook recommendation algorithm is probably the single most dangerous thing, if not in the world, then in this country. And if we can get to a place where you're not feeding people like this QAnon stuff or right-wing extremism or white supremacy in their recommendation on Facebook, that could potentially really be big. We'll have to see.
I mean, it begs the question, why now, right? And then is this too little too late? And I think the answer is obviously yes. Another thing to note, Zuckerberg on the earnings call yesterday saying Apple is its biggest competitor. I thought that was fascinating.
Yeah.
And if you just look at Apple, he said, look, Apple's iMessages, for example, are pre-programmed into the phone, right? So Facebook wants to be the place where people communicate. So you don't normally think about Apple, which makes iPhones and gadgets, as a competitor to a social media company. But clearly that is what Zuckerberg's going for. And I think it's the start of a narrative, right, that Facebook's trying to paint here, making Apple maybe the bad guy. But I don't know if it's going to work. I mean, Apple has, I think, a lot more brand loyalty than Facebook.
I would think so. Plus, Apple actually creates a product that people like. Facebook doesn't create anything. It's just a bunch of code. Facebook. Don't get me started, Jill. I would work at Philip Morris before I worked at Facebook at this point.
Okay, some COVID headlines now. We are a week into the Biden administration. The White House's new COVID-19 response team resumed regular pandemic briefings yesterday, acknowledging that the rate of spread is slowing, but the baseline's still extremely high. Just quickly, for example, I think 2 days ago we were at about 146,000 new daily cases. So that is down from over 200,000. Again, there was a time when we wouldn't have even fathomed 100,000 new daily cases. So we are extremely elevated in this country. January now the deadliest month so far in the U.S., and the White House warning that 90,000 more people will die in the next 4 weeks from COVID. The new CDC director urging Congress to pass the $1.9 trillion relief bill to help with testing and vaccination. Researchers have discovered more evidence that the South African variant is resistant to antibody treatments like the ones from Eli Lilly and Regeneron, while DNA testing company 23andMe has launched a new tool that can predict the likelihood that an infected person will require hospitalization.
There's an example of an algorithm actually doing some potential good for the world. Facebook should take a lesson there. I want to mention one thing. One of our listeners, and I'm forgetting his name right now. I'm sorry. But he wrote in from Harris County, Texas, and he sent us a link to a wait list they have for vaccinations. This is a fantastic idea. In a perfect world, you'd be able to go on like a website, right? Like a federal COVID website, put in your information, saying you want a vaccine, and you would get a text message when your slot is available telling you where to go, right? I mean, that will never happen because we don't roll that way here, but one can dream, right?
President Biden also signed a series of new executive orders to combat climate change, saying that we cannot wait any longer to take on an existential threat. The orders will shoot to double offshore wind energy, electrify the federal vehicle fleet, create up to 1 million jobs, building electric cars, and more, though they were quickly criticized by Republicans as being job killers.
Also a job killer, a planet inhospitable to human life. But I'm basically of the belief that anything the federal government can do now to show that it's serious about climate change is just a net good. This is small ball. The stuff that he's doing, he's doing what he can without Congress, right? But like you said yesterday, Jill, the way out on climate change, to the extent that there is one, is in the private sector. We're getting to a place, we may already be there actually, where it's just not profitable to invest in, coal plants, oil drilling, internal combustion engines. The fact that, and this is true, almost without exception, clean energy is now cheaper to produce than fossil fuels. That is a far bigger deal than anything out of DC, probably a far bigger deal than any story that we've covered. I'm actually hopeful a little bit hopeful with regard to climate change for the first time, when you just start to look at how cheap it is becoming to, store energy in a battery, to create wind energy, solar energy. I mean, these are really good things, and the market is going to get us there.
Switching gears, a second police officer who was working at the Capitol during the riot has died by suicide, according to newly revealed testimony. Jeffrey Smith, an officer with DC Metro, is the third member of law enforcement to die either during or in the aftermath of the mob attack, and the eighth fatality overall. The Capitol Police Union says nearly 140 officers were injured that day, including some who suffered brain damage, crushed spinal discs, stab wounds, and one who lost an eye. Carlo, it's just horrible.
It's like we say, every day it's worse, right? Every day it looks as though that day was worse than it looked while it was happening, and also could have been way worse than it was. These cops, these should be the Democrats' witnesses at the impeachment trial. You should put that officer up there who lost an eye and say, here's the real life victim of this mob attack that was ginned up by Donald Trump and the Blue Lives Matter crowd. Also, Jill, on sort of a similar note, the Department of Homeland Security yesterday issued a terror bulletin. I hadn't seen one of these in a while, but this one was warning of domestic extremists who they say may have become emboldened in the wake of the Capitol riot. The memo doesn't cite a specific threat. It's more of just like putting it out there that they're worried about this, making a point of saying it's not just the far right Stop the Steal QAnon people, but people who have grievances over everything from COVID lockdowns to police brutality. These are the bulletins they used to send out back in the aughts about some new Al-Qaeda plot, right? Now they're basically warning us for to be on the lookout against ourselves. It is really highly dispiriting, I have to say.
I would agree with you there. Meanwhile, Carlo, San Francisco's school board voted almost unanimously to rename dozens of public schools and pull the names of historical and political figures like Abraham Lincoln, John Muir, the environmentalist known as the father of national parks, and even the current sitting Senator Dianne Feinstein. Lincoln got his name pulled off a high school for his treatment of Native Americans. Feinstein got her name pulled over a Confederate flag controversy from the 80s.
Dianne Feinstein making it into the top and the bottom of the pod.
Two stories today, I
know. Go figure. Oh, Jill, this story was designed in a lab to infuriate me on a 6 a.m. on a Thursday morning here. It's actually hilarious that Feinstein is on that list, but they're taking the names off of school. Lincoln, like you mentioned, FDR, George Washington, he's gone. These are only some of the greatest Americans to ever live. People who vanquished the Confederacy, Nazis, the British. This stuff is bad for a number of reasons, right? For one, it provides instant, unlimited fodder for Fox and the New York Post and these other sort of like merchants of outrage in the media, which ends up hurting the left when they're actually trying to do policy, as opposed to just this sort of low-hanging fruit. The other thing is it's just meaningless, right? It doesn't not this kind of thing, this kind of sort of like wokeness, I guess you would say. It doesn't make a single person's life better in any appreciable way, right? And San Francisco, by the way, is an absolute disaster zone right now. I mean, that city is in serious trouble. These people, and it's not the San Francisco School Board job to, vaccinate people, but they should be fired for thinking that this is a priority over getting schools reopened in that city. It's like this is this is enough to like turn me into a Trump supporter.
There are definitely a lot more pressing issues than the name of schools, especially when you're talking about Abraham Lincoln. And it's one thing if you want to remove, if the Confederate flag was flying somewhere.
Yes.
This seems like an issue for a later date. Definitely something they could take up, but do we need to do it mid-pandemic? Before we go, if we got a few people who wrote in after I butchered the word Michelob yesterday, and with the words that they mispronounce or words that other people mispronounce that annoy them. Carlo, take it away.
Okay, so Jan wrote in. She said the one that annoys her is charcuterie. So she's a Francophile, clearly, and she says that she doesn't like that Americans pronounce that word charcuterie because it is a French word and it's supposed to be pronounced charcuterie, I guess. I don't know.
Jess and Julia wrote that their mom pronounced couch like conch. I'm throwing an N in, which
Conch
I've
like a
never
seashell.
heard, but I'm guessing that is like so my mom from Brooklyn would add R's. Still does add R, so sofa, like a couch,
Sofa.
a sofa is a sofa. My friend Alyssa, I didn't think to notice, I knew that she was just doing it with an accent, but Jess and Julia were saying they actually thought there were, like their mom did it so much, they actually thought there was a silent N in there. Like they thought when they went to go spell it, that it was, they're like, where's the N? They thought that there was supposed to be an N.
Some other ones, the classic nuclear versus nuclear. That was a George W. Bush special, if you remember. GIF versus GIF. I always say GIF, but apparently it's GIF, right? The moving images on the internet.
I think it is GIF, yes.
Yeah. Gyro versus gyro. This is one I never know whenever I order that at a diner. Euro. I always say gyro.
So I think a lot of it's just Americanized, right? I mean, it's a Greek word, and I believe it's euro.
Right. I think it is euro, yeah.
But we say gyro.
Yeah. Also, this is one that Becky said. Acai?
I don't know
it's
how
like
to
a
pronounce
like
that.
a breakfast.
Yes,
it's like a breakfast bowl or something. I don't even know what that is.
It was very popular. I mean, it's like a trendy acai bowl. But I never know how to pronounce that. Another one that always trips me up, or I don't say it that often, but naivete.
Naivete. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Let's leave it
We're
there.
off the rails, Jill.
That's what you need to know for Thursday, January 28th.
Bye, guys.